Good morning, this is David Wheeler. I'm logging a little bit early to get things set up. So welcome. We'll start in a moment.
Thanks, David. Are you actually on site someplace?
Yeah, I'm actually at a hospital. Had to drive in my dad and be for driving my dad for a scheduled operation. So
Oh, good.
life
Well,
interrupts. Yep. So
yeah. I hope all goes well.
me too. Me too. The expectations will be fine, but duty calls.
Absolutely. No worries.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Man, David on the spot, putting out the agenda link. I appreciate it.
I am here to serve mankind.
We appreciate that.
You may not be familiar with that quote. It's from an old Twilight episode where you
Oh, yeah,
discover
to serve man, yeah.
That's right, and you find out that it's a cookbook.
Awesome little button. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, can. Those of you who have not yet added your names to the roster, I will, please do so.
And pay attention to add your name under the roster, in the roster under the right date and not under the template. Come on, Michelle.
I never managed to do it right.
I know, every time.
Maybe we ought to put the template in the bottom to, trying to anticipate errors and fix them ahead of time.
I think that is a
good idea. Good
idea.
idea. Yeah.
Using the power of Google.
Are you moving it, Crow?
Yes.
Okay.
The date says still, oh yeah, now it's the right date. It was yesterday.
We'll get started in a few minutes after the hour. If folks have either updates to projects that they're involved with that are part of this working group, or if you have some opens you want to discuss with the group, we have a couple things from Laurent to talk about shortly. But if anyone has any additional topics, please add them. We'll give it one more minute and we'll get rolling. All right, folks. Mr. Wheeler has put a link to the agenda in the chat. If you could, please mark your attendance. That'd be super awesome. If you have any opens you'd like to discuss, please put those down a little bit further in the agenda. First off, as always, do we have any new friends that wanted to introduce themselves to the working group and say hello?
I'll raise my hand on that one. Actually, I'll maybe even turn on a video. Is it working? It is. Yay. Hi, everyone. I am VM Brisser, but we're all friends here. You can call me Vicky. Oh my gosh, David, you're wearing a mask. How weird. Yeah, hi, I am Director and Senior Strategy Advisor at Wipro Limited. Rob, now I'm feeling left out. I am starting to lurk on a whole bunch of OpenSSF calls to kind of get the lay of the land and see how we can make the biggest impact or any impact and try and contribute. So I'll probably just sit around and shut up most of the time and listen to all the great stuff that you all have already done and see where I can bring in some people to help us.
Great. Well, welcome. We always appreciate people coming and listening and sharing their experiences. Do we have any other new friends that wanted to introduce themselves to the group before we get rolling? All right. If you have any items you want to add to the agenda, please put them down here in the open section. Looking at our member projects, does anyone have any really important information they want to share with the group? Any updates from our projects? Mr.
I
Wheeler?
do. Yes, that's right.
The chair
All right.
recognizes the esteemed gentleman in the mask.
Excellent. The OpenSSF Best Practices Badge. As I think most of you know, this used to be named the CII Best Practices Badge. It's now been renamed. Because of that, we need to change the logo. Renaming things and changing logos is one of those things that's important, but it's absolutely a bike shedding event and there's no getting around it. But it's important to have one because it's what it helps people remember. We have several draft logos that are posted, some discussions about it. If you have opinions on this, please just post to that GitHub issue and let's hear it, because we want to get this resolved and have a new logo that actually. Oh, and you're going to follow the link so you can actually show all the. So right there, you're seeing the old logo that says CII. So we have to fix that. And if you drag further down below,
Want the goose?
There were questions about the goose and the trophy, but both were too generic. So the idea is we want to combine a trophy and a goose somehow. So if you keep going down, keep scrolling down there, Grove.
There it is. Yes.
There we go. All right. So we have three option A, B, and C are the current proposals. All combine the goose and the trophy somehow. Several folks like the trophy on a shield, and somebody actually created a fourth one. I'll call it option D. Tell us which one you like. If you would propose like something else instead, tell us that too. But just, now is the time. If you have thoughts about logos, tell us and let's get that done. Okay? C or D. All right. No. The Zoom chat is the wrong place. That will end as soon as this Zoom call ends. So if you want your opinion to actually be listened to, put it in the issues where everybody else's are so that everybody sees the thoughts. Okay? So
Awesome.
Do want your thoughts, but make sure they're in that place so everybody sees them and they're recorded and all that good stuff. Other than that, the best practices badge will just continue to update libraries as we always do because everything changes and we keep track of that stuff and we're trying to not be behind. I'm sorry, Crow.
I have a chalice just like that I drink adult beverages out of sometimes.
Well, that wasn't the thought that we were going for, but
Well, that's what I thought. Excellent. Thank you. Do any of our other member projects have updates? And please listen as David mentioned, go to that GitHub issue and vote. It's important. Get your feedback. But any other member projects have anything they wish to share?
Maybe from the SKF team. So we actually started 1.5 weeks ago with the SKF learning platform. So I briefly mentioned it last time we had the meeting, to really create like this self-study, hands-on learning capability with the 3 profiles. So secure development, web API, penetration testing, and ops and infra. So we actually started with that. The team, the company that I work for, they heavily invest in resources and make people available to achieve this. Actually, one already delivered. He converted all the Python labs that we have, like 75 labs, converted them into Node.js labs. So that is already a nice addition. And now also other colleagues are busy mapping them to Java and to .NET. Parallel to that, we are also working on the curriculum, slides, videos. Also changes has to be done with the SKF application itself to facilitate a certain flow when you are going through the whole learning process. Also, in the meantime, I'm wrapping up the single sign-on solution. So we tested it in a Docker Compose local installation. It seems all to be working. So now we're also writing a blog and doing the documentation. Then a small part converted to Kubernetes. So that's also done. And then we're basically ready for that big release. Yeah, a lot of stuff actually happening there.
Guys are busy.
I think, yeah, we have like 4 or 5 people now working on it, actually. Yeah, so that's going to be pretty amazing. Also, we need to see at the time when it's ready and done to also involve the OpenSSF marketing team. I don't know if we have one, but
We do.
okay, of course, a stupid question. Because as you know, so the company I work for, they're very going to publish it big, but also probably it's not 100% sure, but also other partners and companies want to help and provide resources. So from OWASP, OpenSSF, the companies who partnered and contributed, we actually want to align to come to a nice marketing announcement and stuff like that. So if it's ready-ish, I will involve and ask for people who we can involve in that to also help with getting that message out.
Yeah, we'll loop Jennifer in, and she has access to the folks back at the LF that we can, marketing and comms folks. So we'll see what we can do to augment that messaging. Perfect.
And I also, when I look a bit more in the future, I also spoke at least in the OWASP organization, and they said like, hey, we could actually hopefully in the future also have like a 4th profile saying, hey, OWASP tooling, where you have like the possibility to really play with the other projects. And to be honest, I also think we should have in the future an OpenSSF profile track as well, where you can play with all the OpenSSF tools, right? In a nice lab environment and try things out, right? But for now, that is future music, a lot of things and vision there. But first we want to deliver the 3 tracks itself, right? The secure coding, web API, and the ops infra. And then from there we will, hopefully, get more things in it and more profiles and tracks. So I'm really excited about that.
Great. Any questions for Glenn? There is a request, if you could potentially link to the demo, that would be super groovy.
Of course. I will put it in the sheet as well.
Cool. Any other of our member projects want to share updates?
Yeah, I can go. I don't know if Azim is in the call. So I'll talk on behalf of the scorecard team. I think we launched a V4 that was last week. I copied the blog, the link to the OSSF blog post. And right now we're working with the project by If company, which is a UX company based in London. We worked with them on salsa.dev, six.dev, and we're working with them now for a scorecards.dev website. This is work in progress though.
Awesome. Yeah, I've seen both the Salsa and the Sigstore sites look nice.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to Lauren's point. I think I've brought this up last week also, but if folks maintain your, if you guys maintain any repos or projects, we would be very happy to get some feedback on the scorecard action that Lauren just launched in V4. So yeah, please do install it on your repositories and provide some feedback, and they'll also get us some eyeballs so that we can say that some important repos are actually using this tool.
Excellent. Any questions for Laurent or Azim? I see some studious attendee put a comment about the Open CRE Common Requirement Enumeration project. I'm curious if you could talk a little more about that. Is that related to the inventory CRE project that they used to attend here?
Hi, yeah, I'm Spiros. Yes, this, you have an excellent memory. This is
sometimes
exactly it. So we went away for a while, developing a bunch of new features and adding a ton of new data. Now, since September, the September OWASP 20th anniversary conference, we launched opencre.org a little bit more publicly. Now it has links between several standards for now, including most of the OWASP documentation projects or standards, ASVS, cheat sheets, top 10, web security testing guide, and others. And also we map CWE and NIST, not completely, but significant portions of it. And if you go on the repository, there are 2 chunky pull requests open, one to add also tooling and code as nodes that can be linked to, and one to map ZAP or WASP ZAP alerts to CWE and other CREs. And there is another pull request coming this week to add significant parts of SKF, the Security Knowledge Framework that Glenn is developing, to CRE as well. The plan for, like, the vision for the project is to be able to be like a one-stop shop, also queryable via machines for pretty much any security related like information or links between standards. It's not a content hosting platform, but it gives you the links of where the content you are looking for is hosted and how it relates to each other. And it starts from like regulation all the way down to, here's the code or Terraform that allows you to do this, which should be pretty handy for, as I said, like any machine or human who wants to find out the links between high level and any other level concepts.
Excellent. Any questions for Spiros? I'll go ahead and adjust. We had some links to the older material, so I'll update our links in the repo that talks about the CRE project. And we have somebody wanted to talk about Git Bomb.
I presume that's Ava.
Sorry about that. Was fighting with Zoom. Couldn't get it to unmute. Just dropping a note and a mention for those who've been aware of the project. Should be launching, any day now. And I wanted to ask this group if this is a good forum to talk about it in the future, or if that would be a different group. And I can give a quick summary on it if folks here don't know what it is.
Please, if you could give a summary, that'd be awesome.
It is a proposed mechanism for automatic and verifiable artifact resolution. So being able to go from source files in any build process for any language and have them automatically traceable all the way to whatever the final build is. If it's an executable, a library, a Docker image, doesn't matter. The goal of the project is to make that zero cost, zero effort for developers, most developers in the world, by doing all the work in a finite number of places. And open source has an infinite number of projects, but there are a finite number of compilers and linkers. We've got a white paper. Some folks have seen my draft of that. It's getting some updates. We're about to launch a website for it and community meetings, things like that. So I just kind of wanted to give a little update and ask if this is a good group to continue sort of coming back in every so often, dropping more updates here, or if I should do it in a different OpenSSF working group.
What does the group think?
I have a question first. Sorry. Just to clarify, did you mention from source up to the binaries, or it is just tracking the binaries?
The end results, if we're successful in building this, which it looks like it shouldn't be that hard to do, is that for any binary that you have, you could scan the binary using a very small fingerprint embedded in it to then cross-reference all source files, regardless of language, regardless of the depth of the tree, against source files that are known to contain a compromise or be of a vulnerable version. You can cross-reference at runtime or at launch time the source tree for any given binary that you have in hand. That's the goal.
Sounds really interesting, because in Java we have fat jars and shadow jars and etc. But sounds super interesting. Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, Ava, I'm a lot of people may not understand. If I can try to summarize something longer in one sentence, it's the goal is to insert a bunch of cryptographic hashes into the produced results. Feel free to correct me, Ava. It's your idea.
Yeah, that's a fair enough summary. Insert a 20-byte hash, or on that scale, into all binaries in a consistent manner, so that they can be chained together. At each step of a build process, you can point to the binary, point to the hash of the binary in the previous step.
So where are you gonna store the like, you have hashes that are stored, where is the content of the hashes actually stored? Like, there has to be a mapping, right? So
yep. The spec is pretty long. I don't want to take up the whole meeting going into it, but I'm happy to answer questions. I just dropped a link in, and that draft is now a tiny bit out of date. It's good enough, but once we launch the site, there'll be a bunch more info.
Yeah, Ava, to answer your original question, I mean, it clearly is related to this working group. You could also make a good case that relates to the supply chain working group.
Indeed.
Frankly, I don't see any reason why we can't hear about it in both.
Okay.
I mean, having knowledge as opposed to a lack of knowledge is probably the better thing.
Yeah.
I
kind of had the same thought. There's a couple working groups that it made sense in, but I wanted to ask the members of those working groups for their opinion.
I'll second David's. Go ahead, please.
would agree. I would agree that it fits here, and for me, it also fits into the tooling working group.
Yeah.
Yep.
But if we do not have a strong opinion, I think this one is quite a good choice.
My opinion is that, well, I'm definitely interested in that. So I would like to at least have a date for sure.
Okay.
I think that to get more, to get things going and to work on it, to actually work on it, I think the tooling working group, as Martha said, it is a better working group, but I would definitely want to have a date. I mean, if it's not part of this working group, I will definitely go and lurk into the working group where it is.
Yeah. At the moment, we're going to run it as a separate project outside of any foundation for now. What I anticipate happening is GitBomb will have 2 high-level working groups of its own. One, the spec discussion, and one for languages, and then that one will probably fragment into different discussions for the implementation for each language or compiler. As folks in the Rust community go build something, folks in LLVM go build something, they might need different mailing lists or whatever. But I'm happy to come in here and give updates as things go. The only update right now is stay tuned. I will drop, once we have the site up and mailing lists in a regular meeting, which I'm hoping we launch by end of this week, I'll drop an announcement to the OpenSSF lists.
So this is Arno. I'm sorry, I now I'm confused. Eva, are you proposing to bring this to this group or not? Because it sounded initially you were proposing this group to land here possibly, or some other group, and then you just said, but this is going to stay outside. So what is it that we're going to do here or somewhere else within OpenSSF?
I'm not proposing this group take on any new work. I was asking if this is a group that would want updates on the project, if there is a way that it fits into this group's work or not.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I was getting confused, because
sorry for
otherwise
the lack of clarity
I would
there.
agree with what you said before, that it seems to me that this would be in the tools working group. But I have to admit, even after a few months now around OpenSSF, I'm still unsure how things get organized around the different working group, or maybe disorganized, I should say.
I think we can conclude that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Gail.
I think we can conclude that this is relevant for many working groups. And if it's primarily about disseminating information about this going on, I think nobody would be offended if you for sure send it to more working groups. Maybe presenting it just once is fine, but inviting the others over would be like an obvious thing to do. But I guess we're all interested in that kind of, we shouldn't travel about where exactly that is going to be presented. And you don't need to do it like 5 times over.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I think the group overwhelmingly is very interested to learn more. And I think we definitely could assist in evangelism, as kind of sharing good practice with the open source development community. We can figure out a way it's easy for your community to get updates here, whether you go to something like the TAC and then we bring that back here, or we have a special request periodically for you folks to come in and maybe give us a little 5-minute update. We'll work out those details.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Thank you.
folks.
Thank you. This sounds very interesting. Any additional questions or comments for Ava? All right. Laurent wanted to talk about some general security guidelines. Is that your top 10 resource talk?
Yeah. I sent an email to the working group mailing list, I think last week. So some context, last time we had the meeting, I said that some people in our team are working on package managers best security practices. And I was asked to send an email to formally ask whether it's fine to have it as part of a work stream in this working group. So yeah, I'd like to discuss this first and know whether there's any feedback or concerns.
And not everyone here is familiar with Omega. Could you give folks the elevator pitch, like kind of what Omega is in a nutshell?
Sorry. So the first thing is not about Omega. The first question I have is about the package manager's best security practices. So not Omega. If you look at the agenda, it's basically this part. Yes, this part here. Yes.
All right.
So yeah, maybe don't show the Omega project. I think it's confusing. So we started writing a doc on NPM best security practices. We have a draft and it's being reviewed by the NPM security folks. Right now they're busy on something else. So I'm still talking with them. We're going to get back to the draft soon. And we also want to start working on the PIP best security practices. We have someone from the Python Foundation who's happy to help us there. So yeah, I'd like to know if it's fine to make package managers best security practices a work stream of this working group. I guess that's my question.
How does the team feel about that? Does that feel like that is aligned with our mission? Something we want to contribute to and are able to contribute to?
I definitely think it's within scope. We need to define what it is a little more deep, title, what are we going to cover, what's not going to be covered. But I mean, as far as best practices go, absolutely, this makes complete sense to me. Comments from others?
I second what David said.
Could you repeat that, Marta?
I second what David has just said.
I have to hop off. I have another meeting right now. But Laurent, I used to work for Gradle. I used to be on the security team for Gradle. If you want to hit me up around Gradle and the Java ecosystem, please DM me in the Slack. I'm happy to sit down and have a conversation with you. I don't have time to write anything down, but I'm more than happy to. And I also agree that best practices for package managers, very, very relevant. So, but yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via the Slack when you get some time. I'd love to chat with you more one-on-one.
Can you add a comment in this doc so that I have?
I don't have it.
Slack?
I don't have it open right now. I'm currently on my phone. So Jonathan likes you. If somebody could add that for me, that'd be great.
Yeah, or in the chat.
JLNE. Yeah, I'll do that in the chat. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Jonathan. Any other comments or questions?
I'm hearing a bunch of positive and no negative. So I think that this is a thumbs up. Crave or Xavier, will you add that to the README to identify this as a working group task? And our first task will be figuring out what the task is, as it were. Working out the scope of this. But that's okay. And I presume that will be a common topic for next meeting, is trying to refine that and start working on the contents.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, so I'll move on to the next quick update. So I said earlier that we, as the scorecard team, we're working with this UX company called Project by If to set up the scorecards.dev website. This company is the company we worked with for the salsa.dev website and the sixstore.dev website. And something that we're trying to do with them as the next project is having a landing page for that basically ties all these different tools that the OSSF is developing. The motivation being that from a user's point of view, it's pretty hard to see how, you know, sec-store and cosine and salsa all tie together. So we'd like to have a central point where we can explain all this more in detail. So that's so I wanted to have some feedback with this, and you know, we're looking also for a domain name. That would be a good domain name for this central landing page, and I'd like to have some feedback and from everyone about this as well.
And is the intention, this is like on behalf of the foundation, or this is just representing a couple projects listed here?
So this would be, I think, more on behalf of the foundation, because this is, I mean, this isn't something we really have discussed. We haven't yet discussed, but since it's going to, you know, have all the, you know, the different toolings, I guess it would make more sense to have it on behalf of the foundation. But if you think that should be a separate project, I guess that's also fine. I guess I'm looking for feedback on this as well from the working group.
I think if it's, go ahead, David.
I'm trying to figure out what you're combining here, because if you're combining data from multiple sources about open source projects, I mean, we already have multiple projects that are doing this. You know, we already have metrics.openssf.org, which combines.
Oh, sorry. So by data, I meant more about tutorial and guidelines, and how, as an engineer or as a developer, what's your journey to secure your supply chain, for example. It's not about data as metrics data. It's more about how do you take me from where I am right now to, you know, to the next step where I secure my development cycle, and how do I deal with scorecard and things
So this
like
sounds like more like a guidance document.
Well,
yeah, it's more it's guidelines. It's guidelines.
It sounds a bit like the initiative we started a while ago with this landing page, this one pager where we also reference, right? So you have like the developer coming, wants to learn something or implement a certain piece in the SDLC, for example, and then clicks on, you know, that part, sees the tooling, click on it, you go to the tooling, and there you have then documentation and guidance, right, on how to do it. So yeah, I think it's a bit like yeah, like that one indeed.
So around like naming the domain, I think I would suggest we take this to the TAC to see kind of how the foundation feels about it, and potentially get something aligned with the OpenSSF existing domains.
And I
that
think
way,
a better idea. Yeah, and I think you know, not just a domain name. That's the easy part. Well, that's actually not the easy part, but that's a hard part by itself, I guess, getting on a name. But the other problem is, and what's going to be in there, and how does that relate to all these other things?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
so
it's mostly about tooling, basically, and guidelines.
If you'd like, to maybe put out a proposal or get a Google Doc together with some of your ideas, I'll be glad to work with you, and then we can go and kind of talk about it with the TAC. And I do like Glenn's idea. We've been talking in this group for a long time, and we've just not had time to get back to it, is having an infographic to help people. And that may be something we can incorporate there as well. Any other comments, questions, or suggestions on this topic? All right, do you want to move on to the next? The top 10 security recommendations.
Do you want me to take this one, Lauren?
Yeah, please go ahead.
And he's been talking a lot. So yeah, just as a quick reminder for everybody, the Omega project is the sister project to the Alpha project, where On the alpha side, the project is to do like a high touch engage on a few number of projects. The Omega project is a low touch engagement on a very large number of projects to improve the security of those projects. So what we want here is to develop materials and guidelines and other tools that scale, that where we the OpenSSF don't have to handheld each project on to improve their security. So one of the requests that Lauren and I agreed to take a stab at from the project was to take some of these security recommendations that we have, whether they're from the scorecard project or from the badge or other projects that we've been doing research on, and also including some of these, the research on the project, the package manager guidelines that have come up that Lauren was just proposing. Can we come up with a top 10 list of topics that we would then go and flesh out and provide to the Omega projects as a first touch point and say, here are some things you can go do to immediately improve your security. So we came up with this list. We organized it by, let's say like 2 through 6 are things you just flip on, whereas some of the other ones are a little bit more involved auditing your things like your CI/CD or your permissions. But anyways, we came up with this list. Each one of these items is going to need a document written on it. And for the documentation for the Omega project, we want to keep pretty high level because because the more detailed docs we want to go in that other project, the general security recommendations project, not something that's pigeonholed to Omega specifically. But we do want to come up with this top 10 list as here are the things you can go do and improve your security. So we want feedback here. Are we missing something big? Do we have the order wrong? Do we have something on here that is not very important? Click on it, provide feedback, and we'd be very happy to get that. Sorry for the sharing.
Yeah, have you looked at the badges? Yeah, have you looked at the best practices badge? Because that's also the point of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So might want to talk about that at some point. And some of these things, like for example, multi-party review, I am all for that. Of course, for the vast number of projects where there's only one developer, this is probably not a reasonable thing to ask them to do. Certainly turning on the updates and in general turning on all these things is a good plan. Pinning dependencies, good idea for apps, terrible idea for libraries. That's something you should not be doing on libraries because in fact that would pin you could never update your libraries.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of specifics on the package manager system there as well. So again, like a lot of these are going to be the recommendations, and then the top level headline is what we're looking to settle on here, and then the specific recommendations will be need to be developed.
Yeah.
See, Vicky has a question.
Yeah, so as I skim over this, one of the things that really stands out to me is that a number of these are fairly GitHub specific. And if you go looking at the critical FOSS projects out there, a large number of those are not on GitHub. They might be on GitLab, they might be in Apache, they might be in Eclipse, but they're not necessarily on GitHub. And so relying on GitHub for security recommendations, I think, is maybe not the best idea. If that could be more generalized, that would be better.
I would strongly agree with that. And as I've said, it's been a while. Urge folks to consider that open source is very broad. And I'll drop a link in chat. The very first study I've ever seen trying to measure how much open source is not on GitHub there's a preprint available. I'll drop a link in that. It's really interesting.
Yeah, but I agree with that. And I'll also comment back on the, hey, high level. You have to be careful about if you say do X, you need to mean do X. If you mean do X sometimes, then you better say do X sometimes and then what the sometimes rule is.
Yeah.
Because if you have a simple rule that's wrong, that's worse than a complicated rule. I'm not big for complicated rules, but if you know that if the simple rule is obviously wrong, you lose your audience because they look and they know you're wrong and you are not to be trusted.
Yeah, so if you could scroll down a tiny bit, the
It's
template
hard, by the way.
essentially is for each sorry, where it says template there, for each guideline that plan here is to develop, again, a small doc like a one-pager that says the why, the what, the how, and then here's to read more. So that's going to really explain when this applies, those answers to that conversation, David.
Okay, I have some comments. I totally agree with having this template so we can verify that if it's pertinent to apply to whatever project we're working on. I totally agree to have something very abstract, but again, having like, for example, like this, enable multiple reviewers, for example, in GitHub is this, and for example, in GitLab is like, the keyword is like that, in Gitea, maybe doesn't support, but you are at least giving hints to the majority of the community. I already comment, but this is a general comment. I prefer, because this is like the condensed quick wins for security, is for me, it will be like a checklist. So it should, for me, and checklist, I like to start with the easiest steps at the beginning, so you can cross down as many as possible. This gives you a sense of, oh, I'm going forward. So I will always start with the easiest one, and we already have some feedback there or communication with you, Jeff. And this is something from the other topic about dependency check. I added some of the common tools that are for Java. For example, X-Ray, Sneak, the Gradle and Maven Pro plugins for dependency check that connects to OWASP. And yeah, so those are my comments.
Thank you. So yeah, so and I saw your comments in the doc, and I really appreciate that. If anybody has comments, please feel free to comment in the doc. We have some comments. Somebody taking notes from this meeting. Thank you very much.
So I had a
I have a general question.
Permission limited. So if you'd like comments on the doc, you folks need access.
Yes, I'll provide access. Unfortunately, I can only assign access to a Google group or an individual. But the next iteration, I'll try to solve this doc issue, permissions issue.
Now, have you talked about this proposal with the Michaels who run Alpha Omega yet, or is this?
Yes,
okay.
We've sent that to them and as well.
Okay.
In the Slack.
So they're aware of this of this proposal.
I
I'd
believe
say it's the other way around. It's Michael asks someone to do it, and we step back and we say we're gonna help you with this.
I see. Great. Okay. I just want to make sure that make sure that people are talking to each other.
Yeah, and I just really want to reiterate from what I can see on the screen right now, it's only like 9 through 14. A lot of these are perhaps good practices for projects that have grown up on GitHub, but they countermand a lot of the standard best practices for older projects that evolved off of GitHub, and that's going to not land well.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find that some of the most critical projects also are the ones with the greatest longevity. So we do have to do a little balance there. Sorry, Rob.
Zav, go, and then I'll go.
Oh, thanks, Rob. Yeah, I have a general question. This doc, is it for what is the audience? It is for the projects themselves, or is it for the the Omega team who will go and who will nudge the project to adopt it. Because if it's for the people of the Omega project who will go to the project, and then they will get this list as a kind of guideline for them, but then they will adapt when they talk to the project. And so they will adapt whether they are on GitHub, on GitLab, or Bitbucket, or whatever. Or is it something that we want to kind of send to the project and say, hey, follow that? Because this was not my initial understanding of the Omega project at the beginning.
My understanding is that due to the scale, we would want to be able to send this. And again, it wouldn't be this exact doc. This is just the brainstorming of the titles of the list. Each item on this list would have a one pager with that what, why, how, and further links is what we would want.
Yes, so I think some context about this is this isn't something that you would send upfront to the team on GitHub. This is something that after the Omega project has worked with a team, they'd say, hey, you know what, here's a list of things that you should be, that you can keep with you and try to work on to improve. So I think at that point, it should be pretty obvious that if they're not on GitHub, they're not gonna follow the GitHub guidelines. But yeah, does that make sense?
Well, I'm not sure. Then I got two different answers here. So it will be sent after the first contact.
So no, not even after the first contact. After you've worked with the team for maybe a month, and once you've completely finished working with them, you say, hey, you know what, to-do list for you guys, something to remember that you can try to improve on. So I guess.
So it's not directly sent high scale to everyone. So it can be adapted to the specific case of the. So this is not exactly what I got from the first answers. So this is what, okay. Okay. So yeah, I think in this case they will adapt what they send to the project.
Yeah, but it's a good point.
There? Like, what if we don't? I mean, can we have this as a doc that is sent that is self-explanatory, where it, you know, the explanation for each item lets the project know whether this applies or not? I mean, like, what is your concern on sending it if it's not customized already by the Omega project?
Well, I was just building on the very valid comments that Eva made. I mean, I'm from GitHub, and I know that I wouldn't like a document from OpenSSF talking only about GitHub, because I know that a lot of critical process projects are not there. So, so yeah, that's it.
If I could jump in here, I mean, I have a specific opinion, which is, you know, the Omega folks, they're talking about 10,000 plus projects. Thinking that the Omega project is going to tailor a document for each of 10,000 projects is kind of mind-boggling to me. I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think so. So I think this document has to be written so that, you know, to Xavier's point, it can be used by a project on GitHub, but it doesn't require that it doesn't require you to be on GitHub or only work if you're on GitHub, because we want people to be able to, we want to have secure software regardless of the platforms it's on.
So I have.
Yeah, so we'll circle back with. Sorry, go ahead.
Finish your statement, please.
So I wanted to say that we'll talk again with Michael, but I think the first goal was for the Alpha project. So we keep saying Omega. I think the first audience was the Alpha project. So actually the project where you're working with, not the Omega side of the project. But I think once we've kind of ironed out how the document should look like, we will want to send it through the Omega project. But I think it will first be like a pilot with the Alpha project.
So
if I may, two questions. First off, does the group feel it is appropriate or us to contribute to this, since we are the OpenSSF Developer Best Practices Working Group? I'd like to get a kind of straw poll here. Is this something we feel we need to contribute to? Yes, no, I see.
Yes.
It's obvious people have thoughts, so.
Good. So we will mark in the minutes. We feel this is something we want to collaborate on and contribute to. Second question, what is your expected timeline for having this material put together? What is your deadline?
I haven't thought of a deadline yet. Yeah, sorry about that.
So when would you like feedback by so that we can continue the discussion?
I think, go ahead.
I mean, within a week would be great. Again, I think we're gonna, go ahead and start taking some of these line items. And so another item on the agenda was we wanted to ask for help. If anybody was interested in helping write one of these documents, the why, the what, and the how, for one of the top line items, and that's a longer project. But comments on the top, the top list, we would like pretty soon, because we want to go ahead and start working on them. And if you strongly feel like one of these shouldn't be there, then we wouldn't want to waste that work.
Yeah, I do have a question about overlaps. A number of these, if you use scorecards, you're automatically going to see pinning. A number of these things are going to show up if you do the best practices badge. It's okay to repeat something, but I mean, how much repeating do you need to do, since so many of these are also covered by the badge, for example?
That's a good question.
My only argument there is how easy is for your particular project to implement one or the other. If you cannot, for whatever reason, go with option A, at least you're going to cover some other things by going with option B. So it's a matter, as we have been discussing, probably there are large projects where we can or we cannot. So if this remains small and actionable, and I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and I just want to re-echo, for this to be to work, it has to be something that can be implemented by smaller projects, folks that aren't on GitHub, folks that have been around a while, that have 2 maintainers in their spare time working on the project. And a whole lot of this is right now, it reads as though it's really biased towards large, well-funded corporate projects, which is the purpose of Alpha, or the effect Alpha is having, rather, if not the purpose. This has to work for those independent projects that still are used everywhere.
Right. I like to imagine something that can be applied to the Linux kernel and to is even. Okay, is even's 1 line long. Okay, that's how much code we're talking about. How much work are someone willing to spend for a 1-line project?
And it has to work for compiled projects just as well as non-compiled things like Python and .NET. So like the recommendation to use a CI/CD system doesn't make sense for those.
I'm willing to accept CI/CD for those, but yes, your overall point, I totally agree with you.
Don't build releases on developer machines is what I meant to say. That line, right? Like,
yeah, okay, fair enough.
My Python package, like, there's nothing to build on my machine.
So I think also realistically, we're not going to cover everything. The first iteration of the document is going to be somehow biased toward GitHub, probably because that's where, that's where we feel more comfortable. But that's why we need community help to help, drive, for maybe different CI/CD places. So I think this is an iterative process.
As a Microsoft employee, I will dare to say that whenever this is deemed, V1 and ready to publish as a set of recommended practices, it must not bias towards GitHub. And even folks at GitHub will agree with me on that.
So I'm not saying bias in the sense we encourage
totally agree
people
with
to
that.
use GitHub. I'm not saying bias in the sense that it's we want to encourage people to use GitHub, but I don't think we'll be in a state where we have everything ready for every single platform, and so we need to iterate, and that's why
But make sure. But you know what? Every single is a hard. You don't. That's a hill that you don't need. Give me more than one. Give me several, and write the text so that it's clearly possible in several. I'll give you an example. If the Linux kernel is not going to do it, you have a problem. Okay, the Linux kernel isn't developed on GitHub. They use email to share things around. Okay, and so you got to adjust to where the projects. You got to make sure that you focus on what's required, not a specific implementation of it.
So I'm going to say feedback well taken. I completely agree, and I do think that was the intention here, but it didn't come out in the titles that we wrote. So, for example, you know, on number 4, require multi-party review. Like we made an attempt there. Like we're not going to say turn on GitHub branch protection as the title. We're going to say require multi-party review, and then in the description describe how you would do that on a few popular platforms like GitHub and GitLab. I do kind of have a concern though on some of these, like the GitHub apps and OAuth apps. Like I think that is a top recommendation for projects on GitHub. I don't know how to generate, like some of these I may not be able to be made generic. So that's going to be something that I think we're going to have to work on and think about.
Oh, that's totally
In
general.
our last minute, Yodam has his hand up, and Azim after that.
Just a quick maybe suggestion, something that came to mind. Maybe when we think of the ordering of it, we can maybe divide it into things that can be verifiable, whether it's on GitHub or any other source code platform. For example, if you enable some kind of flag, what I'm thinking is kind of something like the CIS benchmark, to have like a complementary project that you can verify some of these things that are verifiable. Then you can run a simple script and it tells you, okay, 1 to 5, you're good. Maybe put that as the top 5 things that you can verify. Whether it's, if you're in Bitbucket, it will do something specific. If it's on GitHub, it will check something else. But the tests can be automated. And then things that are more soft, maybe will be on the bottom of the list.
Thank you. Azim, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to take up too much time. So I guess I was just saying, Jeff and Lauren, maybe given all the feedback we've seen so far, probably our best action item to take here would be to say, let's flush out scope for this document, to say that even if we are focusing purely on GitHub projects, let's make it clear, or at least if we are planning to go for more, let's figure out what's the exact scope, what kind of projects and what kind of open source repositories are we targeting. And then we can like probably look into these 1 to 10. So probably next week or maybe in 2 weeks when we meet, probably that's the discussion or that's the feedback we should be discussing. So, you know, at least we know that there's an action item for us and also for the working group for the next 2 weeks.
Azim, are you familiar with the best practices badge? Maybe we should talk offline because you're duplicating that work. I don't understand why you're redoing it. We spent 5 years working on it. Why are we redoing it? So let's talk about this. Things like the 2FA, we can just move that as an example of what's already covered in something else instead of you redoing the work of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think Laurent, Jeff, do you know what? I mean, I guess this is initiated by Michael Scovetta and Michael Windsor at Google. So I'm trying to understand what exactly is Omega project trying to cover here.
No, not Omega. I didn't say Omega. I said the best practices badge, which covers a lot of these. So I think we're maybe redoing work that's already been done. Let's help you not redo. Let's have you make new wheels instead of making existing ones.
Fair enough. So David, how about, so I'm just trying to figure out what action item should we take. So maybe the 2 questions we want to clear out is like, how is this actually different than the best practices badge? And also like, what's the scope? Like what projects are we actually trying to cover here? So maybe that those are the two like narrowed down questions we should actually try to answer and like have that responses ready by next working group.
Got it. Crope, can I suggest those who are interested in continuing this conversation, if they're available, I'm available. We can just close this meeting, and those who want to continue this one bullet, we can just continue the conversation for a little while. If
Yeah,
everyone
I
else
have
is
to
up
run
for it.
because I have to go record
I
a
can,
podcast.
that's fine. That's
Are
fine.
you in as operator?
I don't know, but you can make me host.
I'll do my best. That sounds very technical.
Well, I have confidence in you.
Let's see here. Let me stop sharing. Yeah, and please, everyone that's still around, make or watching the video on YouTube, make comments and let's continue this conversation. I think it's worthwhile work. Let me figure out how to do this nonsense.
Yeah. So Azim, are you able to stay for a few more minutes?
Yeah, I can stick around.
Excellent. Okay, and anybody else who wants to, that's awesome too. Just I am all for doing stuff, but I hate to see stuff getting redone 12 times. So
Agreed.
let's
You might be host. I
I
don't
might
have
be a
an
host already.
option,
Well, let's see
so
here.
I'm gonna drop.
All right, let's see if I click on more. Oh wait, I must be host because I can pause the recording.
There you go. Yeah, if you could stop the recording, that'd be great.
Yep. All right, I will stop the recording right now because I don't think anybody else wants to see the. Well, I mean, we could keep it. Does anybody care, or you'd rather stop it because we're officially stopping the working group?
If you want to continue, if it's interesting for posterity, I could catch up later. That would be interesting.
Yeah. Well, if nobody objects, let's just keep the recording going and then.
Yeah. From my opinion, as the chair here, I think this is something worthwhile work for the group to do. I agree with David. We're already doing a lot of work in the best practices badge, and I hate rework. It's one of my biggest pet peeves. So whatever we can do to leverage that existing body, great. And I will catch up. And if we need to have another additional conversation, we can get that set up via email. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. So just
Okay.
open, like, I'm not sure that we can have that productive of a conversation without one of the Michaels, because I think we're just speculating a little bit on what
I've had
the
endless
intention
meetings.
of the list is.
Oh, I've had endless discussions with the Michaels. I mean, seriously, I'm at all the Alpha Omega meetings. So
I think the first question is like, from my understanding of what we're trying to do here is come up with a list of 10. And if we just say do everything in the badge, that might be things that we're trying to scope it down to a list that is some size that the Omega project considers as the right size to send.
Yeah, and I think also
but I
if
look
I can
for their. Go ahead.
Something that I think we also want is we don't want to just say or turn on branch protection. We want to link to actually the documentation to do that, which I think is I don't find it on the CI badge best practices. It tells me you have to do this, and then for my platform I have to figure it out. So I think we want to make it as easy as possible.
Okay.
For
All right.
users
So
to do.
okay. So the solution. All right. It's actually not true. For some, it does say. For some, it doesn't. The solution then is to say, hey, the badge should add this. And
Yes,
then
maybe.
it's added for everybody. So and what's great about that is that means that everybody can then see it, and we already have several thousand projects participating. So we already have people pipelining through the badge. So if we can do that, that would be fantastic.
Okay, now, so I'd say that's first point, David. The second point is we also want to focus on things that can be automated, and I think the CI badge practices you said mostly focuses on things that have to have a human behind the wheel to check. If you think we can add this in the CI badge practices, I think that would cover everything that we also have in mind.
Here's the problem. If you want full automated checking, that's what scorecards is for. Scorecards focuses on what's automatable, automatically checkable. But in terms of can we check whether or not the project does it? The best practices badge focuses on what's important, whether or not it's easily checked. Okay.
Yes.
And it does have some that can be checked automatically, but actually whether or not you check it automatically or check it have a humans have to be involved in the change.
Yeah.
So if you're going to change something, it doesn't matter which approach you use. You still have to have a human approve the changes.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. But I think it'd be great to have it in the CI badge. Honestly, I don't see why not. Like, if
Oh
you,
yeah,
but
for branch protection, sure. Although you have to be careful. I don't know. I don't have the exact numbers, but the majority of open source projects that I see are single person.
yeah, yeah, no, I
So,
mean,
so saying you
so,
must protect it when there's only one
no,
user doesn't make any
no,
sense.
I think this whole thing about you're overblowing it on, oh, we are telling people to use 2LGTM. We're not going to say you should do that. We say we recommend doing it if you can do it. I
Right,
mean, I
which
don't
is
think
great.
that's what Jeff and I had in the doc. I
Right.
think that has been kind of exaggerated. Like, that's not where we're going with this. But so
Okay,
yeah, I'd like to see it in the CI batch practices. I think if we don't want to reduplicate, because I think that makes sense. But I think it requires a lot of changes on the CI batch practices side. Like today, it's pretty generic, and if you want to start having a broader documentation, like how do you do that? Like, for example, people have been saying, oh, how do you do it on Maven, and how do you do this on the and CI batch practices doesn't do this. So
there's an easy solution for that. You have a link that says, hey, if you want to know how to do this, click here, and you go to a doc that tells you how. Done.
Yes.
That's an easy solution. That one's easily solved. Of course, somebody now has to write the doc.
Yes, and also some users who want to filter by stack, like if they're on using PyPy on GitHub, they don't want to see the thing on Maven and GitLab. So the site has to become dynamic, and I think that's where we're kind of struggling today. Like, how do we make that happen? So on the badge,
I think for the top 10 list, we don't want dynamic. We just want it to be. We want the one pager to be generic, and then we want links to other places. Yeah. And so if we want these generic one pagers, if they want to be on the best practice badge site, I think that's fine. I just think I want a table of contents that is specific to Omega. So, and if all of the document, if the one pagers are all part of the best practice badge, I think that makes sense. But where could this table of contents live?
Okay, table of contents of the top 10 recommendations or table of contents of something else?
Top 10 recommendations.
I think we draft it first before we figure out where it lives, but
sure.
But if it's going to be resulting from the Omega project, I mean, you could live under the Omega project. Mm-hmm. They do have their own repo. I don't know if that's public yet, but it's about to become public if it hasn't become public yet.
Okay.
I suppose we should talk to Michael to see what he thinks then.
So, like, assume we have a markdown on a GitHub repo that is for Omega and says, here's all the top 10 recommendations. And then each one is a link to a page on the CI best practice. That is what we intend, what our vision is, where we have the what, the why, and the how, and the links.
Okay, see, I'm not. Do you mean the CI best practices badge, or you're just some CI best practices in general? We're talking about. I'm a little confused here.
The badge website.
Okay.
Where it has an explanation for each item. Is that what?
Yes. Yeah, it certainly does have that. For every criterion, it has a rationale why you should do that and how do you do that. It has a rationale, then a discussion. No, it's there is a single page. If you wanted to if you wanted to see just the criteria, there is a page that shows that all to you. Give me a second. I'll drop the link here. Let's see, best practices. Criteria. All right, if you want the full set of information, let's see here. This is for just the passing badge, but it'll still. If you want the absolute full set, and get rid of this /0. This is the all level. This is a much longer list there. Yeah, so if you go back to just the passing badge level, you know, there's the what is it, the details, and if there's a rationale because it's not obvious, there's the rationale. Typically,
Yeah, I mean,
how do you do this? Go ahead.
I'm saying I'm reading the language with the musts and the shoulds.
Yes.
Is that might not align with what we want for Omega, where we're not listing requirements, we're giving recommendations.
Yeah, but your recommendations are all shoulds and musts. You know,
No,
turn on X. Yes, it says turn on X. Require this.
Well, that's
enable
the title, like the.
Yeah, that's my comment earlier. If you're going to say it as a requirement, then it's a requirement. If you don't mean a requirement,
nothing in the whole list is a requirement.
Okay, so all right, so
so you think we should use this?
Sorry, I'm a little lost here. So, what is exactly the context here? Like, because I kind of do agree with David in the sense that if you want to come up with a new set of best practices for, let's say, the Omega project, is there a reason why we can't extend the CII, the web page or the badge itself to do it? Like, what is that?
I mean, it all depends on what you want to do. The simple approach is simply say, statement number 1, get a best practices badge. Statement number 2, work on your scorecards. I would add statement number 3, work on your on salsa. Now, each of those obviously drill down to other things. But having a short list that covers many other things because they're designed to cover lots of other things is okay.
Yeah, but I think that's too big of a can of worms for a project that we want to. If we want a project to spend 10 minutes, we want them to make like measurable progress. Like we want if the top 10 things are like flip these 10 settings, like if they could just do that, that would be awesome. But if it's do best practice badge, do scorecards, do salsa, people are just going to say, oh, I can't do that right in 10 minutes.
Sorry, so if I understand correctly, are we saying that best practices badge, since we are asking folks to go get a badge, that might be too much work? Instead, should we rather just expand the website and say that these are the best practices and here's a way where you can like get a swag out of it by telling us that you did it and we'll actually give you a badge? Like, would that work?
Yeah, most of the projects that are well run, they get a badge in 20 minutes. So now the problem isn't usually, hey, there's all these questions, especially since a lot of them some are automated anyway. The problem is, one of the requirements, for example, is you must tell us how to report vulnerabilities, and they don't. Well, they're going to have to change something like, adding a security.md file and saying where to send the emails to or whatever they want to do. And that's usually the problem, not the list.
Yeah, there's work to these items if they're not doing it.
Right. That's I mean, no matter what we put in this list, that's the real problem.
Yeah.
But things like I just hate this. Hey, let's do coordinated disclosure. We've already discussed this earlier, and maybe it needs to be extended or whatever. But I hate redoing the same things again and again. Yeah, and by the way, the don't build releases on developer machines, you will not get universal agreement on that.
Yeah.
You'll in fact hear I trust my machine better than better than some external cloud system. So
yeah, if you consume it yourself, but if others consume it, maybe they don't trust you as much.
Well, do you trust the CI system?
Well, some
I
people.
mean,
Well, I mean,
you're
okay.
you're not gonna. Here's the question: is this your personal list, or is this a
Yes, yes.
consensus, or are you trying to create a consensus of what most security experts agree on? Because that's a much harder list. It's really easy to come up with a list of your opinions.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get
Yeah, but
consensus, you're gonna have to give on some of these.
Yeah, it's a consensus of what the Omega project thinks.
Yeah. Okay, but is that your opinion, or is that, do you see what I mean?
No,
For
I
example,
think
a
so.
lot of people don't like the way the Linux kernel developers work or the way Kubernetes works because they don't like, they'll tell you straight up GitHub is a total failure for them. It's not that it's a failure in general, it's that it doesn't work for their project. So
Well, the
they
recommendations
roll
are
their,
to use GitHub.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
roll their
But
own.
well, that's in fact the Linux kernel folks do. They have, the Linux Foundation actually pays a non-trivial amount of money specifically for the infrastructure of the Linux kernel. It's too big, GitHub won't handle it. So we actually do pay, and it's over $1 million for our own infrastructure, specifically to support the Linux kernel, because there's so many developers that they have a different process. So I'm going to push back on some of these and say, you got it. Are you sure you really mean this? Because I don't actually I don't agree with you on some of these, and that's okay. We're having a discussion.
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
just because there are exceptions to the rule doesn't mean it's a good recommendation.
Yeah, and now we got to start talking about this. And I had this problem.
Yeah.
I've had this problem for years on the best practices badge. Is the what I did is I worked with a bunch of people. We came up with hundreds of recommendations, and then we went out and talked to curl. We talked to the Linux kernel developers. We talked to all sorts of folks, and they came back and said yes or no, or we agree with their goal, but not the way you've written it because you have assumed a particular implementation that's not true. So it's going to take you a while to come up with these, and where you can, it's much better to borrow folks who've already gone through this pain
So,
than trying to
David,
rewrite
would it
from
make
scratch.
sense?
Sorry,
David,
I
would
have
it makes
drop off, but I just want to make my suggestion quickly again before I leave. Like, it would be very, very helpful if Jeff and Lauren, if you could like sync with Michael, or at least like write up a paragraph of the scope and try to figure out
I don't
why
think we can scope it down. We're not going to say this is recommendations for GitHub. Like,
No, I don't mean scope that way. I mean, like, is there a reason why we shouldn't be extending CIA best practices? And like, what is part of the thing that you're trying to achieve that does not fall into CIA best practices scope? And like, maybe that's the first, like, blocker that we need to address.
I can tell you right now, we want a more concise list. Is my guess.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Is that so? I guess
But is concision the goal, or is getting secure software the goal? I can easily make a list of 2-3 things.
Software.
Yeah, exactly. But here's the problem: if I did all those 10 things, am I done?
No.
Yeah. Yeah,
But,
exactly my point.
People like have psychology. They need to take things in steps.
Right. Right. Which is why I think you're better off reusing existing work that says, for example, let me point specifically to the best practices badge because I'm familiar with that. Every time you do something in the best practices badge, you get a higher score. Technically you start at 0. They're very, very, usually most people get quite a bit from the automated tools. After that, every time they make an improvement, their score goes up.
Yeah.
So you say, hey, what happens if they only have 10 minutes? They will see their score go up if they take time
the thing
to
is, if they
those.
say I only have 10 minutes and there are 100 things and I could do 100 things to make my score go up, they're going to ask, what are the 10 most important things I should do? Which 10 should I do first? What's the recommendation?
Yeah, I don't. Most people, I'm not sure it's worth the time. Yeah, but the badge takes 20 minutes. The whole thing, it's 20 minutes in general. On some projects, sometimes takes 30. So if you're seeing, for example, the list of all the criteria, most users don't see that because the system will normally fill in most of those things, and so people only do the parts that aren't that we can't tell from automation.
Okay. Well, again, this isn't. I can't speak for Michael, the Michaels.
Well,
so
right, right. Neither can I.
Yeah. So
right.
If I think based on what I've heard was the request. I still think we need a list of 10. However, if we talk this over with them or the project and they say no, we actually don't need it. This is fine. Then that's cool with me. Like
a list of 10 is fine, but the problem is I think you're going into way microscopic things.
I don't want to go into microscopic things actually.
Yeah, but I think you're risking that because you're focusing on very specific things to do in 10 minutes instead of the broader lists like get a best practices badge, get scorecard, work on your salsa level. Now that's already going to cover a lot of other things. If it doesn't cover some important things, then let's talk about getting those into our existing projects for measurement.
I'm assuming that those three cover everything. But what I'm saying is like those three should be the last on the list. The first 5 things on the list should be something I can go do in 10 minutes.
Yeah, this 10-minute marker I think is the wrong goal. The goal isn't to do something in 10 minutes. The goal is to make it secure. And now I agree with you that we should help people get those done. But this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Because if you give them a list of 10 things and they do those 10 things, they will leave. And they think they'll be done. I worry about that.
Part of the things would be to get a badge for further. No, what I mean is the first few things are the one that are easy to do, but then we want to keep a long-term relationship. So CI badges would definitely be like start your CI badge so they can get continue further reading, install scorecard so you see alerts as we add new stuff. So I guess what I think
if you want to put those if you want to put those last and say do these first and then do these larger things, I mean that would make sense to me. Okay, if that's where you want to go. But I would hate what I would hate to see would be the turn on 2FA and put a tool in and you're good to go. I think we all agree that's not really where we want them to think about. We want we want them to think the bigger picture. And now it's a matter and the other we want them to have the bigger picture, so I would bring in the existing larger sets at some point in your top 10. The other is, I think the other things are the things we've already talked about, which I think are totally workable. Just tweak the text in terms of not making it GitHub specific, making it's clear that I don't know, just the way it was worded, it says recommendations, but they sure look like requirements to me. So but we can work that text. I mean, that's not I totally understand that problem.
Cool.
And I will say that boy, it is hard to get good text. Trying to make it clear that do it this in this case, but not in that case, is really hard. So
So what do you think we should I guess for us, for Jeff and I, is first
try
to make it not talk to Michael, not make it GitHub specific, and make sure that we convey the information that once you've done 3 things, it's not the end.
Right.
We want you to continue. I think was a bit missing maybe.
Right. So I think if you pull in the best practices bag, scorecards, and salsa, and maybe a little explanation there about why all of them, I think you're going to be able to bring in those bigger pictures. I certainly don't object to saying, here's a couple things we want you to do first. And no objection there. Awesome. As long as they're reasonable things to do. That would be my other concern, because I will say that now we have in the badging had an advantage, because when we showed up, we already had commitments from a whole bunch of projects. You might want to do that too, by the way. Before you release, here's the list. get a whole bunch of well-known projects to endorse it. So when Greg K. H from the kernel and Dan Stenbit from curl and the Node.js folks and lots of other projects said, yes, you know, we've already got a badge and we already like this list, it made a big difference. Now you're coming in with money, that helps, but you're not giving the money to the project, so it doesn't help very much. So I think you are going to get more buy-in if you make a list and then interact with a lot of projects to make sure it's the right short list, as it were.
I think what Lawrence said is going to help, where while we really are developing this for Omega and scalability, it'll be used in the alpha engagements. So we'll getting feedback there, hopefully.
But I'm saying don't send it out in general until you've had some projects review it and say it's okay. Okay, I'm saying something much stronger, because otherwise, if you send this out and it's clearly, if you send it to say a whole bunch of Omega projects, okay, if it's just clearly wrong, you're going to lose credibility, and you don't want to lose credibility, and there's no need to. I'm not saying don't do this. I'm saying work with projects. Just don't put it out and say we decree.
Yeah, that's kind
it's
of
okay
why
if it's a draft.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I want to pilot it also. I think
right. There we go.
I said we want to pilot it with alpha. That's the first goal.
Okay.
But you make also a good point that we don't have to go only through alpha. We could try to do it ourselves. But I think alpha is the right team to kind of, pilot it.
Thank you for that word. I should have said that word, pilot. That's what I'm looking for. You want to pilot it with actual projects, get their buy-in, and then first of all, you have a much better list because you've made some adjustments. I will say that we made a huge number of adjustments when we interacted with various projects, even though we knew about them in general. But just it's not that we weren't new. We knew about them, but talking to the actual project leads who live it day, all the time. There's nothing like that. So, yeah. All right, I got to go off to another meeting, and you probably do too. So,
thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks,
for your
David.
time. Yeah. So,
Thanks,
hey,
David.
thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.